Thank you so much, Shalini. It is true, and it is indeed an important issue. Rubina, you have tremendous experience in this.
Uh, Actually, I just had a kind of a question for either Osama or Amir. It's like, philanthropy, like if we you see last year, the kind of, the migrant relief support and things like that. So there was, like Osama said, everybody was just giving because it was food and ration and things like that. But we had cases in Telangana where we've been working, where there's a bunch of advocacy groups, there's a bunch of activists, and they were quite dead against it, which is rightfully so. That this is the job of the government, and we should hold them accountable for it. And philanthropy
Yeah,
or these kind of funds should not be getting into it. So uh, on one hand, it's like a dilemma for organizations working on ground. On one hand, we have this huge amount of funds coming in and people who need it, and then on the other side is something which you want to hold the government accountable for. So how do we
yeah,
go about it? Hmm.
yeah. Osama?
It, it's like pretty
Listen,
Yeah,
tough to do such things. Very tough.
philanthropy, it's a, I mean, it's a good thing that Rubina has highlighted. Actually, what happens is that somehow it is believed that anybody who is part of the philanthropic industry or a philanthropic sector, they don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep, they don't need to, you know, uh, uh, you know,
yeah, yeah. Wear good
spend anything.
clothes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wear good
spend
clothes.
money on
Yeah,
petrol. Spend money on
anything.
petrol.
So it looks
Uh,
like that they are like jinns who were born without any requirement of oxygenating or feeding or of those things. And I mean, for example, you won't believe, last year we were doing some audit or some negotiation with Tata Trust, and they said that the administrative cost will be given only 1%, and they increased it to 2.5%, and they were extremely happy to increase it to 2.5%. And on the other hand, there are organizations who say 7%, then somebody say 5%, some 6%. And then there are exploiting organizations who says that I won't take anything less than 15%. And then you wonder that इतना पैसा क्यों लेते हैं, 15% क्यों लेते हैं, if you go to UN organization, it is like it must be 25-30%, it might be that they might be spending on themselves. So it is very interesting that the sector which requires to also use human resources. I mean, for example, if we ask the same question to government of India or any government, you take so much of tax, why are you using on yourself? How will you run the country if you don't use it on yourself or your staff or other things? So, I mean, we don't have a reply, but again, I would go back to add those extra line into Lalita's, suggestion, that I think it is very important that this sector gets a rehaul of education of what is required, how does it run, and that way I would say that professionalization of this sector by accountability, responsibility, creating legal framework and operational framework, I would say is not so bad. It is helping to take and safeguard of most of the things. Of course, it is also giving a lot of pain also, and that like Rubina said, one compliance to the funder, another compliance to the government, and then the third compliance, which is the most important now, is social media. What you say and what you can detect, and suddenly what can somebody say. I mean, for example, in DEF's address, which is reflected on Google Map, so anybody can write anything, like the way you go to restaurant, you can rate the place. So anybody could rate, and some guy who might have left in some bad note in DEF had written that this organization spends a lot of money in giving money to their own employee, and he didn't know what he's writing. Obviously, employee ko paise denge tabhi to kaam hoga, but he was writing in such a way that they get funding, but they distribute it among the employees. And if somebody else reads it, they might be thinking that we might be distributing all the money to only employees and not going to the ground. So, and then you keep on wondering that how to delete that message, how to find that message.
Yeah, true. So all sorts of headaches that we have. We have Amitabh. Amitabh again has been, especially in this technology space, which is space for philanthropy. Amitabh has been quite a trailblazer there, and understands not only the efficacy but also the regulatory environment around philanthropy and charity. So could we hear from you, Amitabh?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. So I think a lot of ground has been covered by Osama himself, and then others like Ganesh and Shalini and everyone else who talked about what's going on. See, what has always bothered me, I've been in the non-profit space for a while now, for about 25 years or so. I mean, looking after the industry association first, which some people try to call it as a lobby group, and I didn't like that idea because lobbying is considered to be a bad word for whatever reason, even though I think that is also non-profit work and which does a whole lot of good and has a potential to do a lot of good. So it's not just about NGOs, it's about civil society organizations, it's also about industry bodies which can do a lot of good in terms of helping change policies and regulations. Okay, so sometimes when we look at philanthropy or giving, no one looks at counting these people into that effort. So that's one thing that one should be mindful of. And strictly speaking, when I came into the real NGO world, which was with Osama and DEF way back in 2010, and I also was involved with the US-based nonprofit, and working together with them, bringing in that partnership helped me to also reach out to a whole lot of grassroots NGOs, civil society organizations in different parts of the world, including in the subcontinental Indian subcontinent, also in some African countries. And there are a lot of subtle understandings that I could develop. And Osama knows, and I've always shared with him about how people within the sector kind of differentiate themselves. I have had institutions where when I think it was in Nepal or some other country, where I've met somebody in a civil society organization, and I said, okay, you are an NGO. They took offense, said, oh, we are not an NGO, we are a CSO. So for me, it was an understanding of how people like to be termed even in this non-profit sector. So I thought non-profit sector is the best nomenclature in that sense for people to feel safer. So I don't know why that happens. Maybe because there is some regulatory issues on that. Osama and you would also probably have a more insight, better insight into why within the non-profit sector, people like to differentiate in that sense. That is one part. That bothered me always, but I never could find that answer. The second part that always bothered me was in our subcontinent, especially India and the surrounding regions. Somehow, when we talk about NGOs, voluntary organizations, I see that they are very personalized setups. Okay, and when I compare it to our international non-profits, and some of us are associated with international setups, I see a stark difference in the professionalism and the way they function. Now, I will try to relate that professionalism with the regulatory aspect. I think I also noted somewhere in the chat box is, when the governments try to regulate, they over-regulate here in terms of who should be on the boards of NGOs. The latest example being the fact that you need to sign up on your liabilities as a board member of non-profit, which basically means that if an organization or somewhere in the management or the operational team screws up on some regulatory issue, it's the board member that becomes liable, criminally as well. Civil liability apart is criminal liability also that is now being imposed on the functionaries, the important functionaries of the non-profit companies. Now, I think that's a very serious issue from a regulatory perspective, because it basically is trying to ensure that not only, as Ganesh said, the government intention is to clean up the sector, but I think it's overburdening the sector with a regulation which will actually disable it more than enabling it. in the sense that well-meaning people who want to help run non-profit organizations with all good intentions will probably not like to do that anymore. Today morning, I was talking to somebody from a very important multinational NGO, friend's wife, who is an important functionary there. And I asked her about her reaction to this kind of development. And she says, look, there are a lot of these board members who are resigning now. They don't want to be part of our board. Okay. So on one hand, when you talk about this government's intention, which may be well-intentioned to regulate nefarious activities in terms of improper funding or improper use of funding, I think the other picture is that you are over-regulating to the extent that you will discourage people from spending time, volunteering your services, helping run the organization more professionally. The third part that I see is that, as Osama just pointed out, are you supposed to run a non-profit organization for free without the costs, being recovered? I mean, I know I've been part of a non-profit in the US for about 10 years now. It has a big amount of revenue that it generates, close to $100 million. But I have not seen in 10 years, even once, when our CEO or the staff ever comes back and briefs us about, oh, the regulation changed or the rules changed. Now, how do we respond to this? Not once in 10 years. It's constant. The taxation rules are constant. The reporting requirements are constant. They can pick and choose anybody from across the world to be on their boards or on their staff. They don't have to fill up forms or take permissions from the governments about who can come in and join their boards or even the staff. They can pay whatever they like to people that they either employ or even they get as volunteers. So there's no restriction. So there's this implicit trust and faith in the nonprofits in countries like US, where they're seen to be supporting the government's efforts. And by the way, that is also the part of a definition of a 501(c)(3) in the US, that these organizations are supporting government efforts. Now, here is the other way around. Here, the government and the non-profit sector seems to get loggerheads all the time. And I'm not saying that the non-profit sector is not responsible for some of this, some of the activities that used to go on for a long time may have resulted in these kind of regulatory overburdening. But that's something that we have to kind of figure out how to grapple with, is my initial thought. Maybe we could think a lot more. But this regulation about making people civilly and criminally liable is going to spell doom for this sector more than anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. We just tend to, think that wherever there is a problem, let's lock it up. That is not how one solves problems. I have Sumaira, Shantanu. Would you have a comment to make? Sumaira, first you. Sumaira is one of our regular philanthropists, Lalita, who actually is the kind of philanthropist that you are more interested in. The one who's forever looking for small causes, for good causes.
Watch out, Sumaira, here I come.
Yeah, she's forever there for all those things. Yeah, Sumaira. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Philanthropist or anything like that. I'm just a regular person. And I mean, I'm just whatever services I can give towards doing something good, I would do it. Be it my I do give some speeches and lectures, so some kind of talk or anything like that. But yeah, and I have absolutely no idea regarding the formal system of which this is the first time I'm listening to such a serious talk and regarding philanthropy, and I really definitely have to dig deep into this and get a lot of more knowledge. And yes, and one thing I wanted to just as a suggestion, or I wanted to say, that we need to connect to people. I mean, people like me who are naive and want to do good, and we do have lots of people like me who really want to do good, but we do not have access to a network. I mean, common person, as far as I can see
Yeah.
around me, there are not many people who know anybody or any network which is actually doing some good. People they are really carefree. They don't really think about that they can also involve themselves into this kind of work, and they don't really want to know, or they don't really want to understand. So I want something that could, reach to every common house, be it even a telewala or a big company or an organization where everybody knows how to help. We really don't understand the whole specifics, but I really want people like around my family or around my network or my friends. They should understand, and I really think that organizations are not, because of obvious reasons, that they're not loud enough. They can't speak out a lot, and that obviously shows the bad part about the system. So how to balance this, how to get more people involved, how to be more um, you know um, like you say, loud about everything. That's
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask. Like, it should be easier for people to understand, get connected, and like the visibility we're talking about, and but still people are not connected as much as they should be.
True, very true, Sumera. And that was one of the early points that Sama's talk raised, and that's something that we have to keep coming back to, which is what also Ganesh pointed out. Now, how do we get this philanthropic culture going? There are very few people like who by upbringing or by nature or whatever are ready to give.
You're very kind, Aman Bhai. You're very kind.
No. I mean, this I'm saying very seriously, in the sense that, what I would like to see is, and this is what our project is, a part of the project that Lalita and I were speaking about, that we also need to understand, when people give, what is it that motivates them to give, and that is how we are going to, we will produce many more people like yourself. uh, and that is how things will work, especially given the fact that there is such massive government failure. So thanks, Sumaira.
That's
Shantanu?
one more thing to add.
Yeah.
That we need to explain people more clearly about how the government system works and how things work, because there
Yeah.
needs to be more transparency, and we need to tell people that it's okay to get into such kind of work, and it's not going to harm you as much as you think it's going to.
Yeah. No, actually it's going to benefit you. I mean, it is so obvious.
No, I mean,
that
it's
you
on papers,
you've said
maybe.
it. You've said it
It's
right.
not like you'll get an income tax rate if you give a check.
Yeah.
We've already had it.
But you're right, Sumaira. That fear is there, Lalita. A lot of people actually fear that.
Because
Yeah.
of
I
loss
know
of
it.
knowledge.
That's why I'm saying.
Yeah.
We already had, I mean, quite a lot of scrutinies going on. So, and, so that's where things go a little, confusing, actually.
Actually,
Yeah.
very right.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
I can see
Thanks.
Osama's dilemma. I think you should leave Osama if you have a call.
No. I think we are done.
I was actually what I was actually thinking while this discussion was going on is that philanthropy over a period of time has also transformed being an involved act to an outsourced act.
Yeah.
No, so if we remember earlier, we would get involved in whatever we want to do good for the society or give. तो हम जाके पैसे देते थे, जाके involved होते थे, आप क्या कर रहे हैं, आपके घर की हालत क्या है, things like that, But now philanthropy is pretty much an outsourced job, and therefore we are giving money, but we are not giving time or interest or something. But we at the same time expect a huge transformation, huge accountability, huge responsibility, and even if that comes at a cost, how do you buy a trust? You know, if you're not seeing things yourself,
Yeah.
you're not experiencing yourself. So yeah, I mean, and this is just a scenario. If anything happens at a large scale, होगा ही. कल 5 लोग पैदा होते थे पूरे जमीन पे, अब 50 करोड़ लोग पैदा हो रहे हैं, तो क्या होगा? यही होगा.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so thanks so much. I don't want to take very much of your time. This has been a wonderful start, Osama, because it really brought out all the issues that we want to take up one by one as we go along. You know, each of these issues, the regulatory issue, the reputational issue, the logistical issues, the aspirational issues, small versus big, you know, the culture, all of this, the aspect of being able to fund advocacy versus funding, you know, ground activities, of sub-funding of, you know, the issue that the FCRA notices brought out clearly. So there are, you know, a number of these issues, and you know, of that thing that you talked about, of going and giving in an area where somebody else holds the power and does not want you to be seen as a second source of power and authority. So all of this are questions that I'm sure Anjana, Salman,
I would like
and all
to
have
say
taken
one
up.
thing, that if you think anybody who is bothered about philanthropy, ये मान लो कि जो लोग अच्छा काम नहीं करना चाहते हैं वही दूसरों के philanthropy में इंटरेस्ट रखते हैं, कि वो हो या ना हो. तो अगर ऐसा गवर्नमेंट कर रही है तो ये आप मान लो, या कोई भी कर रहा है या कुछ भी. So they have no intention to do good, therefore they don't like seeing any good happening. तो ये societal issue मैं बता रहा हूँ. Government is part of the society and community. और तो
I mean, you don't have to be apologetic at all when you criticize the government. It is our government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Someone said, you know, you can love the nation, but you can despise the government.
Correct.
अब तो उल्टा क्या है? This is उल्टा. Constitution में ये बदलने वाला है. You can love the person who is running the country even though you don't like your own country. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.